This is a podcast of 98FM's Dublin Talks. Remember, catch the show live Monday to Friday at 10 a.m.
98FM's Dublin Talks with Adrian Kennedy.
98FM.
One of our listeners called Orla has gotten in contact with us, hopping mad to hear from a friend who was in town on Saturday night. Her name is Orla. Orla, welcome to 98FM.
Thanks.
Orla, sorry, if you don't mind, turn the radio down in the background, because it'll get very distracting. Take me to the start of this story. This is your friend Bernie.
Yeah, she's visually impaired, but she's totally blind and she's hard of hearing. Now, I wasn't with her. I just got the story from her last night.
Mm-hmm. So what happened to her?
She was in town with a group of friends. She went to a concert for fighting blindness. And I don't know what time we finished up. It was around midnight when this whole thing happened. And she was with a group of friends. No, I'm not allowed to name them for obvious reasons, so that's okay. They separated from each other. She was on her own, and she was getting into a taxi, and the taxi driver told her to get out. He kept shouting at her and all, so he kept refusing her.
So, okay, this is a friend of yours who's visually impaired.
Yeah.
Sorry, you said she's totally blind, is she?
She's totally blind. I'm partially sighted myself, so I can understand what it's like.
Okay, she's totally blind, and she uses a dog as an aid.
Yeah.
Okay.
She has a guide dog, yeah.
And she was trying to get into a taxi.
Yeah, from McConnell Street.
From O'Connell Street, and the taxi driver said what?
Well, I'm not sure the story of that. He's a foreigner, as far as I'm aware. He just said, no guide dogs allowed in my taxi. And she was just so upset over it.
No guide dogs allowed in my taxi?
Yeah, and so she had to ring her auntie to come into town and pick her up and bring her back home.
And did she try to get into another taxi, or did she give up after this one fella said no?
No, I think she just gave up after that one.
And he just basically bluntly said, no guide dogs in my taxi?
Yeah, well, from what I gathered, he had allergic reaction to this guide dog. How stupid is that, like?
He had an allergic reaction to dogs?
Yeah, well...
Did he say that?
As far as I know, that's what he said to the girl. She was just so distraught and upset and crying. Like, she is very vulnerable. And with hard of hearing as well, that's even worse.
That's unbelievable. I'd love to know, does anybody know the answer? Are taxi drivers obliged to take somebody with a guide dog? I would have thought that they are, because you can bring a guide dog into shops, you can bring a guide dog anywhere. I would have thought that a taxi driver is obliged to take a guide dog in a taxi. If anybody can let me know that, I'm assuming that they're meant to. But his excuse, from what you know, was, I'm allergic to dogs.
Yeah.
It's a bizarre excuse.
Exactly.
So she ended up having to ring somebody else to get that somebody else to come into town to collect her. Yeah,
she had to get a family member to pick her up.
And how is she feeling about being told, no, you can't get into my taxi with your guide dog?
Well, she's very upset to this day. Like, I was talking to her yesterday and I was talking to her this morning. She just wants it out there on the radio and everywhere. She just wants all the support she can get.
Yeah, and I don't blame her. I'm just curious to know why she didn't try to get into another taxi.
I don't know why she didn't try. I suppose she just didn't want the same reaction again.
Now, apparently, first of all, according to this message, she could have gotten another taxi, and it is possible to be allergic to dogs. My nephew is, says that message. Now, I do know people who are allergic to dog hairs. I do know people who are allergic to cats and stuff like that.
I prefer dogs myself, but I wouldn't refuse one.
No, and I assume it wasn't going to get in and sit on the driver's lap. It was going to get in and sit in the back seat.
Exactly.
And, yeah, I mean, I understand how perhaps a driver doesn't want dog hair in the car and all of that, but this isn't your average dog. This is to do with somebody with a disability and a guide dog. And that was his answer anyway. I'm allergic to dogs and I don't want to take your dog.
Yeah, as far as I know, he's a foreigner, and well,
I don't know what that has to do with anything, to be honest with you.
Exactly, it's no excuse, and that's not the first time she's been refused either, so...
Oh, it's not the first time she's been refused?
No. I don't know if it's something to do with taxi, but I've been with her before when she's been refused in the shop. Only I spoke up on her behalf.
Well, stay there for a second, because, Paul, you're saying you're a taxi driver and under legislation you are obliged to take a guide dog.
We are obliged to carry the guide dogs, only guide dogs.
Only guide dogs. And I would have thought that was the law. I would have assumed that was the law. And I can understand how you wouldn't be obliged to take any old dog, but a guide dog, yes. And have you ever heard of somebody refusing a guide dog because they're allergic to dogs?
Never in my life.
No,
that was
never.
Just a guy. That was just a guy who didn't want a girl on her own. He wanted four people. He probably, if he was in O'Connell Street, I can probably imagine that he was parked outside Supermax or somewhere like that. And he wanted 4 people coming out of Supermax. And he just didn't want to take one girl on her own with a guide dog.
Okay, because somebody just texted in to say, if the taxi driver is allergic to dogs, why does her disability supersede his disability? If his eyes swell when he is driving, it will be 2 blind people in the car. Which is a fair point, if he is genuinely allergic to dogs. But you've never heard of that before in your life, have you?
My daughter, we have 4 dogs, Adrian. My daughter's allergic to dogs. She sneezes a lot, but she can still manage the dogs. She only sneezes a lot when the dogs are very badly, losing their winter coat, and so it's like his excuse for me. His excuse doesn't hold water, you know.
Okay, thanks very much.
He is obliged to carry.
He is obliged. All right, that's good to hear. As a matter of interest, Orla, did he get it? Did she? I know she's visually impaired. Did she get his plate number or anything? No. No, so we've no way of finding out who this guy was with the... if you're a taxi driver who's allergic to dogs, I'd love to hear from you on 6797981. Jill, you're on 98FM. Hello, Jill.
Hello, Adrian.
Jill, you're a friend of Bernie's.
Yes, I am, Adrian. She's I know her for a long time, and I've seen her. Can I tell you the place? I'm actually in work at the moment.
Okay, yeah.
Can I mention the name of the place? You can,
of course. Yeah.
I work for Child's Vision in Drumcondra, and Bernie is actually working with me after I come back from my holidays.
Okay.
And I'm working with I'm around disabilities a long time, and I have a visual impairment myself. And that's, now obviously this is only an opinion, but that's like me saying, sorry Bernie, you can't work here. But on what's in highlight of what it's been highlighted on your show is, it's absolutely deplorable that people should be refused and people should be respected with dignity. And I think... And
as a matter of interest, Jill, have you ever heard of a similar story of a guide dog owner or guide dog user being refused access to a taxi?
Yes, I have, and she has actually said that she has, I won't name the lady, but she has said that she was refused from a pub as well.
Because she had a guide dog with her?
Yes, and I think people should, like even taxi drivers, even though some of them, like I was listening to that guy who said that we are entitled to take dogs.
They're obliged to take dogs.
They are obliged to take dogs, but personally, I think some drivers need to be retrained if they have that kind of attitude.
Yeah, but so do I. What about the possibility? And I'm only saying a possibility because I find it a little bit bizarre that a taxi driver would coincidentally have an allergy to dogs, but it is a possibility that he had an allergy to dogs. He could have had the decency to get her another taxi, couldn't he?
Yeah, he could. He could have been a bit more nicer. He could have said, "Well, unfortunately, love, well, obviously this is no excuse, but he could have said it in the beginning rather than pushing her through all that stress."
And really sounds like it was very stressful for her. But as regards people, and this is fascinating, as regards people turning away guide dogs, not only in taxis, you know of people who've been turned away from pubs and other premises because they have a guide dog.
Yes. Now, as I said, the lady said in question that she was refused, but I think she got to the bottom of it in the end. But as I said, like if I'm in a work placement like this, and I said, well, they can't work here because it's like really being discriminated against. And if it was me and I'm visually impaired and I can go for my job and everything else, what really makes me forget that I have a disability is just to be nice to people, because that's what an employer would expect of me.
All right, I'm just reading some comments that are coming in on our Facebook page. One says, for example, trying to get a taxi as a wheelchair user is horrible. I've often had to wait for the first Lewis at 6 a.m. after a night out, which is just a roll home in the rain because it's so hard to get a taxi. As a wheelchair user. Another one says that this is the second time it's happened to her, so that's why she didn't try another taxi. And Orla, this is the second time it happened to her, is it?
Yeah, well, not just a taxi, like in a shop as well. No, I was with her when it happened in the shop. So. And
what happened at the shop?
It was in Deals in the Ilex shopping centre, and it's gone back a month or two ago. She was going in minding her own business doing her shopping, and then a foreign security guard came over and told her to leave the shop until I turned around and stated, sorry, it's a guide dog and you're not allowed to refuse. So I went straight to the manager, and the manager apologised for what happened.
Right, okay, so this was a security guard who didn't realise that you're obliged to allow somebody with a guide dog enter the premises. And in fact, most premises have no dogs except guide dogs for the blind.
Exactly.
Yeah. It shocks me to think, I mean, it's quite obvious when somebody is walking with a guide dog as opposed to just their pet dog. Okay, let me just bring in one last call on this, and that's you, Robbie. You're on 98FM. How are you?
How's it going there?
Good, thanks, Robbie.
Well, there's a few things. First of all, the enforcement of this is very difficult. First of all, a blind person cannot see the person who's discriminated against her.
No, but a blind person can ask somebody to get the plate number off the roof before he drives off.
Well, you would think so, but if you're blind, you don't know where the next person is. So you're like, there's a whole load of cited assumptions made when people think.
No, that's a fair point. Yeah, okay, that's a fair point.
The other thing is that Transport Infrastructure Ireland are the people who deal with these complaints. That's TII. Now, it used to be the taxi regulator, but not anymore. Now, unfortunately, it's not like London where they give €1,000 fine. In Ireland, the fine will be only between €30 and €40.
Oh, right, so it's worth the risk just to say, get out of my taxi, I don't want dogs in my car.
Now, in London, because the fines are so substantial, that a lot of the defences that the taxi drivers use, it's taxi drivers coming from a different cultural background, and they just are offended by the idea of a dog being in their car. It's just not part of their culture. So especially people coming from the subcontinent in Asia, for instance. But it's just a cultural thing. But like some of them put up defences that they were saying that it's religious discrimination because we don't want to take dogs. But they lost on them grounds in Britain because the equality legislation is higher. In Ireland, it's the Equal Status Act 2000 that they're breaking, that they're infringing.
Okay, so your advice to her is what? Get onto Transport Infrastructure Ireland?
There's not much point because she won't be able to identify the taxi driver. Basically,
I have to say, Orla, that's the big pity of this story, because if it were a genuine case that this guy was genuinely allergic to dog hair or whatever, which some people are, or are genuinely afraid of dogs, at least he could have been questioned. It's an awful pity that she doesn't have any. I mean, I know you mentioned earlier on that he's a foreign driver, but sure, there's thousands of foreign drivers, so that doesn't really.
What we're doing is there are new apps out there now that you can do, whether it's My Taxi, I know that's gone now, but the equivalent, or Halo actually. No,
Halo is now called My Taxi.
Exactly, yeah. Well, there's a few others like that. Now, the advantage of using one of them is that you'll get the number of the driver when you sign up for it. So if Bernie has a smartphone, they've got technology on it called VoiceOver. So, for instance, when I turn on my phone, you'll probably hear her talking away there in the background.
Yes, I can, yeah.
11 Tuesday. Press on to open.
So you just look at, that's just an ordinary iPhone, but basically you can get any taxi amp, you can call a taxi anywhere in town using that. Now, it's not safe necessarily. If you're blind, you're classified as a vulnerable adult under the law, 2012 Criminal Justice Act. So for good reason, because you can't really protect yourself in the same way. But equally, you have to be careful that you don't get your mobile phone stolen if you're using it in public, because people will see it as a vulnerable target. So if you can find a sheltered space and get an app like that on a smartphone, and basically that's probably the safest way to get a taxi if you're in town, if you're visually impaired.
All right, Robbie, thanks very much indeed for your call. And finally, Robbie, you're on 98FM. How are you, Robbie? Oh, sorry, Thomas, how are you?
How's it going?
Good, Thomas. What did you want to say?
No, I just think that, I'm a taxi driver myself. And to be honest with you, to put it bluntly, I'd say, if he thought she was going to Wicklow or Wexford or somewhere really far, he'd have forgotten about his allergy altogether.
Yeah, he probably would, yeah.
He would have said, that's great, thanks very much for the job.
Where was she going from, or did she even get a chance to tell him where she was going to?
She was going from Montcallan Street to Mount Miriam.
Oh, that's an all right run, yeah. But sorry, Thomas, you are, as a taxi driver, obliged to take a guide dog. Yes.
Yeah, legally you have to take a guide dog.
Yes.
And when I say you have to, I don't mean to sound like you have to take a guide dog, because that does sound a bit funny. But no, you're obliged to take it by law. Like that's just one of the stipulations of the law of driving a taxi. You know, the girl is there. Like, I guarantee if she had said to him, "How are you, mate? I'm going to Greystones," he'd said, "Yeah, hop in."
Yeah.
But, it's going to Mount Merion. He's just too lazy to take the dog and all the rest. That's all that was wrong with him.
And have you ever heard of a taxi driver with a dog allergy?
No, I've heard of people using that excuse, all right, to have no allergy. I've heard it all before. I've heard it loads of times.
Just because they couldn't be ours taking the job?
Because they don't want to take a dog in the car, that's all. And they say, I have an allergy. And they think that covers them. But to be honest with you, they're just too lazy. As I said, if the fare was a €50 fare or €100 fare, she would have been home.
Yeah.
He would have put it straight away.
Yeah, no bother. All right, thanks, Thomas. All I can say is, if you can, on my behalf, wish Bernie the best of luck. We did speak to her before the show ourselves. Wish her the best of luck. And all I can really advise is if it does happen again to her, to somehow, I don't know how precisely, but somehow get the plate number of the taxi driver who refuses her, and at least then she has some comeback to find out why she was refused, especially if it's happened to her more than once.
Exactly.
All right.
Thanks very much for your help.
You're very welcome, Orla. Thanks very much indeed, and our regards to Bernie.
This is a podcast of 98FM's Dublin Talks. Remember, catch the show live Monday to Friday at 10 a.m.
98FM's Dublin Talks with Adrian Kennedy. 98